Hey there, kiddos, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Uncle Frank. I'm that you are having a great day. And in today's video, I'm going to be sitting back in my very squeaky-ish kind of chair, relaxing and having a little conversation with all of you guys about miniatures. Yeah, the little figurines we use to represent our characters and enemies in the various tabletop role-playing games we all like to play. Specifically, I'd like to briefly talk about the history of miniatures and the impact that the advent of role-playing games has had on the creation of and improvements of an entire industry. In today's video, we're taking a little quote from one Gary Gygax, the individual who, despite Wizards of the Coast's attempts to say otherwise, had a huge role in the creation of Dungeons and Dragons. Some might even say he's the father of the game. Back in 2007, on the Ian World forums, Gary Gygax was answering questions, and one of the ones he received was, "Gary, I have a question about how playing with miniatures did or didn't affect the choice of monsters in the early D&D games. We all know by now that you found the rust monster in a bag of toy dinosaurs. I'm wondering, were you using the toy dinosaurs in your game? Is that why there were so many different dinosaurs in the original monster manual?" And Gary Gygax, he gives this whole spiel, but the first part is the one that I think is most important. He responds with, "There were virtually no fantasy figurines being produced when Chainmail Fantasy Supplement tabletop battles were being played." So that is where the conversion of dime store toys into monsters began. I made a 90mm Elastolan Viking figurine into a blue giant with a club, a Stegosaurus into a winged red dragon, 90mm plastic Indians into ogres, etc. That is an interesting quote because it reminds us that a huge part of the D&D experience, the miniatures that you play with, collect, use to represent your various characters, it is a huge part of the game. Some would say as ingrained with Dungeons and Dragons as the concept of rolling dice is today. And sure, not everyone plays with minis, but a lot of people do still. And at the start, there was virtually no industry for it. And as we all know, a few years come around, D&D gains in popularity, we start seeing products like this. These little pewter miniatures. And they're a bit rough around the edges, but they get the job done. They aren't the most detailed or diverse line ever. They're mostly just guys with swords, skeleton warriors, orcs, etc. There's some diversity, some really cool stuff back here to be sure, but it's all very rough around the edges. And beautiful as it is, it's the showcase of the beginning of an entire industry, these die-cast miniatures. Of course, fast forward a few more years, some decades, in fact, to the late 90s, early 2000s, even mid-2000s, and we start seeing, well, like I showed off earlier, these molded plastic miniatures that come pre-painted. Yeah, pre-painted. That's a crazy novelty. Produced by a variety of companies, in fact, for a variety of purposes. Sure, WizKids produces a lot of these miniatures for the express purpose of playing Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder and Call of Cthulhu, I suppose, and Deadlands. Deadlands is an RPG, right? Am I hallucinating that one? I don't know. You guys let me know. But they also produce a bunch of miniatures for their own miniatures games. That's right. In the years since D&D has taken off and exploded, entire industries, entire hobbies, entire genres have developed around playing with games. Obviously, everybody knows about Warhammer, but there's also Mage Knight, which is... Have I talked about Mage Knight on the channel before? It's basically Warhammer dumbed down, essentially. I think I've talked about Mage Knight before. Mage Knight, Hero Clicks, all those kind of click schemes. There's all kinds of skirmish-based games. Hero Scape, I think, is the one with the tiles. There's entire industries, entire genres of miniatures combat games, which is crazy to think that before the advent of D&D that virtually didn't exist. And now, of course, with the advent of 3D printing technology and uh, all sorts of homebrew stuff and online files you can just download with the click of a button, miniatures have become basically their own homebrew industry. Anybody with a 3D printer can start mass producing their own minis for their games. And that's crazy, I think, to go from a time in just a few short years. I mean, barely 50 years, we go from an industry that virtually doesn't exist to anybody with enough startup capital can start making their own in-house company, effectively producing their own miniatures from home. That's quite the leap in a few short decades, honestly, half a century, to go from virtually nothing to widespread adoption. And D&D, Gary Gygax and co. had a huge hand in just kind of helping that get along. Now, obviously, today we don't always look back at, again, these old little, doesn't really know our focus, these old little pewter miniatures. They don't have the super sparkle. They don't have all the nice deep cut details of the modern miniatures, or thanks to the advent of using plastic as your print, they can't have all these cool details, but they're still nice. And looking back, there is something nostalgic about these old pewter minis that just can't be replicated by the modern day. It's the subtle simplicity of it, you know, where you just know that what you're looking at is a relic of the past, kind of like D&D itself, the original D&D, obviously. When you're playing advanced D&D, or even, heaven forbid, OG D&D, you're taking a peek into the past as it was, and that's worth something, I think. Just experiencing, you know, the hobby as it was in its infancy, I believe, has a lot of value to it. I don't know. It's kind of nice to know that in less than the span of a human lifetime, we've gone from an industry that's virtually vacant to one that's so widespread that anyone you can see on the corner basically will have the opportunity to have their own in-house miniatures market. That's really cool. I don't know. Just wanted to talk about minis, I guess, and talk about how astounding it is that we've gone from, again, as Gygax says, dime store toys, which were these really kind of silly, again, mostly dinosaurs, but other things too, like army men miniatures and such. We've gone from having to reuse toys to having our own dedicated industry. And that's just really cool. But I don't know. I suppose I can just gush about this the entire night, but I should get on with the rest of my workload here and maybe get around to painting one of these. I'll try painting this guy tonight and see what you guys think of the results. Maybe I'll post it on the channel or something. But that's all I got. Please like, share, subscribe. Leave a comment down below if you like miniatures, or hate miniatures, in which case, what the hell, man? Why are you here? Why are you being so mean? Check out the Discord, the Patreon, the TCG player link. All those are in the description below. Thank you again for watching, and have a great day.